Have you ever clung so tightly to something that it began to slip through your fingers? You tried to make it work. You stayed when your heart begged you to walk away. You chased what didn't want to be caught. You made excuses for someone who couldn't even give you the bare minimum. You sacrificed your sleep, your peace, your self-worth, because deep down, you believed that maybe if you just loved harder, waited longer, tried a little more, it would all finally come together. But it didn't, did it? And in that silent place after the storm, after the late-night arguments, the unreturned texts, the exhausting emotional cycles, you're left asking yourself, why does it always feel like I'm the one fighting for something that never seems to fight for me? You're not alone. There's a quiet heartbreak that lives inside so many of us. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It just waits and waits. For the day we stop betraying ourselves in the name of love, or control, or perfection. This video isn't about strategies. It's not about 10 ways to heal, or 7 steps to happiness. It's about something deeper. It's about you and the subtle, unseen places where you've been forcing life to fit into shapes that don't belong to you anymore. You'll hear some words from Carl Jung in here, yes, but more than that, you'll feel the echo of something you may have forgotten. Life isn't meant to be forced. The right people won't need convincing. The right path won't make you beg, and the right love won't confuse survival with safety. You don't need to keep chasing peace by running into the fire. You don't need to keep fixing what keeps breaking you. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to let go, not because you've given up, but because you're finally ready to breathe. In the next few minutes, I'll be speaking to the part of you that's tired, not just physically, but soul deep. The part of you that longs for softness, for truth, for something real. I won't give you answers, I'll give you mirrors. And maybe in those reflections, you'll start to remember who you were before life made you forget. If that voice inside you, the one that's quiet but persistent, has been whispering, something has to change, you're in the right place. So if this speaks to your heart, I invite you to take a breath and stay a while. Let's walk through this together. And if at any point this resonates with you, if something stirs or softens or settles inside you, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a comment below. Not for me, but for someone else who might be searching for the same permission to finally let go. We begin now. There's a moment you don't see coming. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself with thunder or clarity. It creeps in quietly during an ordinary afternoon, when you're folding laundry, scrolling through your phone, standing in the shower, water falling like silence. That's when it hits you. You don't recognize your own life anymore. You're surrounded by people, maybe even loved by some, but it still feels like something's missing, like you've been holding your breath for too long, smiling on cue, saying, I'm fine when you're anything but. Somewhere along the way, you became so used to surviving that you forgot what it feels like to live. And still, you try to hold it all together. You keep showing up, keep giving, keep fixing, because the thought of letting go feels more terrifying than the pain of staying. But let me ask you something gently. What are you afraid will happen if you stop trying so hard? That they'll leave? That things will fall apart? That no one else will care as much as you do? That fear, that aching, desperate fear is what Carl Jung was pointing to when he spoke of resistance. What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. You see, the more you force something, the more power you hand over to it. The more you chase what doesn't align, the more lost you become. Until you don't know if you're fighting for love or just afraid to be alone. Let's pause here. Breathe. Feel that? That tightness in your chest, that ache in your gut, that sting behind your eyes? That's truth, not weakness. It's the part of you that's been silenced for far too long finally speaking up, because you were never meant to beg for love. You were never meant to carry relationships that make you feel small, invisible, or exhausted. But we do it, don't we? We do it because we think it's noble, because we saw our parents do it. Because someone once taught us that suffering was a sign of strength, and that if we just endure enough pain, we'll be rewarded. But healing doesn't come from endurance alone. It comes from surrender, from softness, from releasing the illusion that you can control what was never yours to begin with. There's power in letting go, not the kind of letting go that's cold and detached, not the kind that builds walls, but the kind that says, I love you, but I love myself more. The kind that whispers, if it's meant for me, it won't make me bleed. When you stop forcing things, something strange happens. You feel lighter. You sleep better. You stop over-explaining. You don't chase the text. You don't panic over the silence. You don't rewrite the same message 17 times, trying to sound effortless when you're actually breaking. You just stop. And in that stillness, you realize that peace was never outside of you. It was just buried beneath all the noise you kept feeding. You might think that sounds too simple, but maybe it's not about complexity. Maybe it's about remembering, returning, reclaiming. To let life flow naturally isn't passive. It's not giving up. It's choosing not to drown in waters that were never meant for you to swim in. It's recognizing that alignment doesn't need persuasion, and love, real love, won't require you to betray yourself to feel safe. So if you're tired, it's okay. If you're questioning everything, it's okay. If you're grieving the version of you that once believed effort alone could heal what was broken, yes, that's okay too. You're not broken. You está awakening. And sometimes awakening begins with the quiet decision to stop fighting what your soul has already outgrown. There is a kind of grief that doesn't come with funerals. It's the grief of letting go of a version of you who held on for too long, who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who begged for crumbs and called it love, who thought that if they could just hold everything together, maybe just maybe they would be enough to make someone stay. This grief is invisible, but it's heavy. It lives in the way you hesitate before speaking your truth, in the way your chest tightens when someone withdraws their affection, in the way you rehearse your worth in your head before asking for anything, even the bare minimum. But that grief is also sacred. It means something inside you is finally refusing to pretend. You are not here to convince anyone to love you. Not a partner, not a parent, not a friend, not the world. You are here to come home to yourself. That's why when Carl Jung spoke about letting life flow naturally, he wasn't telling us to abandon effort. He was telling us to stop betraying our instincts, stop betraying our essence. Because every time you force what isn't meant for you, you cut yourself off from what is. Think about all the things you tried to fix, all the people you made excuses for, all the situations you stayed in long after your spirit whispered, "This isn't right." You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you believed healing would come if you were just a little more patient, a little more understanding, a little more forgiving. But healing doesn't mean staying where your soul is starving. Healing sometimes looks like walking away with trembling hands and a shattered heart, whispering, "I love you, but I love me more now." And maybe you're in that space right now, that terrifying, beautiful in-between where everything familiar is falling apart and nothing new has fully arrived. It's disorienting. It's rough. But it's also where rebirth begins. You don't need to know the next step. You don't need a 5-year plan. You just need to stop pushing what keeps pushing back. You need to stop knocking on doors that were never yours to open. Let them close. Let the silence come. Let yourself feel what you've been avoiding, because inside that feeling is freedom. The truth is, some things are not meant to be forced into place. Some relationships are not meant to be worked on forever. Some dreams fall apart to clear space for new ones you never dared to imagine. And some seasons of your life are about learning the quiet art of surrender, of pausing, of softening your grip on the world long enough to realize life was never asking you to prove yourself. It was asking you to be yourself, to unclench your fists, to stop running, to sit still long enough for your soul to catch up with you. Letting go isn't weakness, it's alignment. And when you begin to live from alignment instead of fear, you'll see that life starts showing up differently, gently, honestly, in ways you couldn't have predicted but were always meant for you. So if you've been holding on white-knuckled and desperate, this is your permission to release. Not because the story wasn't real, but because your peace is more sacred than any unfinished chapter. You'll know you're healing when silence stops feeling like punishment, when you no longer reach for your phone in a panic because they haven't replied, when you can sit alone at night, lights off, no music, just you, and not feel the ache of emptiness, but the warmth of your own company. That kind of peace doesn't come overnight. It's earned, not by doing more, but by unlearning the lie that your worth is tied to how needed you are. Because for years, you believed love meant effort, that the more you gave, the more valuable you'd become. But the truth? Real love never had to be forced. You were just used to confusing survival with connection. You grew up learning how to read the room before you read your own needs. You learned how to keep everyone else okay, even if it meant swallowing your own pain. And so you kept trying to be softer, trying to say less, trying not to be too much. You were so afraid of being left that you slowly began to leave yourself. That's the kind of wound that doesn't bleed, but it bruises every part of who you are. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And maybe that's why you kept ending up in the same kinds of relationships. The ones where you were overgiving, over-explaining, overstaying, not because you didn't know better, but because part of you believed that love had to be earned, that peace came after performance, that safety required sacrifice. But now you're waking up. Now you're starting to see that forcing things, forcing people to understand, to choose you, to stay, only leads you back to the same place, emptier. There is such quiet power in letting go, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with clarity. To say, "I release you," is not to reject. It's to respect what no longer aligns. To say, "I won't fight for this anymore," is not weakness. It's wisdom. When you stop forcing, life begins to reveal. You start attracting people who don't need you to shrink to be loved. You stop obsessing over closure because you become your own closure. You stop needing every answer right now because you trust that the right things never require the wrong kind of pain. And you begin to feel free. Not the kind of freedom that comes from escaping, but the kind that comes from finally returning to your own breath, your own body, your own truth. And that version of you, the one who no longer chases, no longer begs, no longer bends past her breaking, is the version who begins to live. Really live. So if you're still trying to fix what keeps breaking you, ask yourself gently, am I healing or am I just hoping? Am I holding on or am I being held hostage by my own fear? Letting go is not the end. It's the invitation to trust, to surrender, to remember who you were before you forgot how to flow. There is a softness waiting for you on the other side of letting go, a quiet, unfamiliar calm. It doesn't rush in all at once. It arrives in small, almost invisible ways. The way you wake up without that immediate knot in your stomach. The way you walk into a room without wondering who might leave. The way you start laughing, really laughing, without guilt trailing behind it. This is what it means to let life flow naturally. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly. And yet, for so long, you believed that pain was the price of love. That if it didn't hurt, it wasn't real. That suffering somehow made you more worthy. That holding everything together, no matter the cost, proved how strong you were. But strength isn't how much you can carry. It's knowing when to put it down. It's walking away from what keeps you stuck. It's choosing peace over performance. And I know it's not easy, especially when your whole identity has been wrapped in trying, especially when the people you loved the most made you feel like love had to be earned. You were taught to overfunction, to apologize when you did nothing wrong, to stay silent so someone else wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But when you let those patterns fall away, you start to meet yourself, not the self shaped by survival, but the self shaped by truth, the one who doesn't need to be perfect to be loved, the one who doesn't chase or beg or plead, the one who trusts that what is meant for her doesn't require self-abandonment. Carl Jung understood that real change isn't found in fixing the external. It's in meeting the internal, in facing the parts of you that you've disowned, the parts that say, "I need help," the parts that whisper, "I'm tired of pretending," the parts that crave rest, but have never been allowed to rest. And when you stop forcing, when you stop chasing, something sacred happens. You become still enough to listen. You start hearing your body again. You notice the tension in your shoulders you've carried for years. You feel the fatigue that comes not from doing too much, but from feeling too much without release. You recognize how long you've lived in a state of waiting for the call, the text, the apology, the validation, and you finally stop, not out of spite, not out of resignation, but because the version of you that waited no longer needs to. You've learned the lesson. You've cried the tears. You've tried every possible path but the one that brings you home. So now you walk that path, not because you have all the answers, but because your soul is done fighting for a place it no longer fits. And as you walk slowly, steadily, you begin to see something you couldn't see before. Life isn't against you. It was never against you. It was just waiting for you to stop gripping so tightly to what was never yours. It was waiting for you to stop forcing and start flowing. There's a moment so still, so quiet that you almost miss it. You're sitting alone, maybe by a window, or on a couch that's held all your silent battles. There's no dramatic music, no grand revelation, just a breath. One honest, unfiltered breath. And for the first time in what feels like years, you exhale without guilt. It's then you realize you don't have to keep running from loneliness, from silence, from yourself, because something inside you has shifted, subtly, gently, like winter melting into spring. That desperate pull to fix everything, it softens. That ache in your chest when someone pulls away, it loosens. That voice that once screamed, "You're not enough unless they choose you," it grows quiet. This is what healing looks like, not loud, not always visible, but undeniable in the way it makes room inside your soul, for breath, for rest, for the parts of you that never got to be seen because you were always too busy proving, saving, performing. You begin to understand that the people who are meant for you will not make you beg for the bare minimum. They will not weaponize your vulnerability. They will not confuse your softness with weakness. And more importantly, you begin to see that you were never supposed to carry all of this alone. Letting life flow naturally is not about passivity. It's about trust. It's about choosing not to chase what hurts, not because you've given up, but because you've finally awakened to the way you've been holding on to old narratives, to childhood echoes, to wounds you inherited and didn't even know were there. You start to see the pattern. You were never chasing a person. You were chasing a feeling, the feeling of being chosen, of being enough, of finally being safe. But here's the truth you weren't told. Safety does not come from being everything for everyone. It comes from being everything to yourself. The way you hold your own heart when it aches. The way you honor your boundaries even when your voice shakes. The way you sit with your pain, not trying to fix it, not trying to numb it, but just allowing it to be. That's healing. That's flow. That's the quiet revolution of no longer forcing anything to fit because you know you were never meant to fit into places that require your silence. You were meant to rise. And sometimes rising looks like resting. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like leaving a room, a relationship, a role that no longer holds space for your truth. And as you rise, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your peace is proof. Your softness is strength. Your boundaries are sacred. So you stop explaining yourself. You stop begging for understanding from people who were never ready to meet you where you are. And you begin to flow, not with perfection, not without fear, but with the quiet certainty that you are done chasing what was never love. Because real love, does not require a performance. It meets you where you are, and it stays. Maybe now you understand why it never worked. Why every time you tried to mold yourself into someone else's expectations, something inside you fractured a little more. Why every time you waited for them to finally see you, you felt yourself disappearing. Why all that effort left you exhausted, not fulfilled. It's not because you weren't enough. It's because it was never supposed to be that hard. Love, peace, purpose, they were never meant to be ripped from clenched fists. They were always meant to be received with open hands. But how could you receive anything when your hands were too full of things you were forcing to stay? Old stories, toxic connections, outgrown roles, expectations that never belonged to you in the first place. And maybe that's the most heartbreaking realization of all. You were never the problem. The space was just too small for your spirit. The shape was too tight for your growth. The love was too conditional for your truth. Let that sink in. You don't have to keep fighting to be understood in places where you're only seen when you shrink. You don't have to keep earning rest by exhausting yourself in relationships that mistake your empathy for permission to hurt you. You don't have to keep choosing people who never truly chose you. You can stop right here, right now. You can let go not with resentment, but with reverence for who you were, for how hard you tried, for the love you gave even when you were empty. And as you let go, life begins to realign itself. Not immediately, not without pain, but slowly, steadily, like a river, remembering its course. You start attracting ease, not chaos. You start recognizing red flags the first time, not the 10th. You start trusting your intuition instead of silencing it. And most of all, you start feeling safe inside your own skin. That's the real gift of not forcing anything anymore. Because when you finally stop pushing, you start listening to yourself, to the universe, to that soft inner knowing that was never gone, just buried beneath the noise. Carl Jung knew that what we resist will persist until we learn to face it. But once faced, it no longer controls us. It teaches us. That's what this season is about. Not punishing yourself for what you didn't know, but honoring what you're learning now. You're learning to release the need to be chosen and instead choose yourself. You're learning to release the people who drain you and instead surround yourself with those who nourish your growth. You're learning to release the pressure to have it all figured out and instead live inside the questions, trusting that life will unfold exactly as it needs to. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. You trusted it. You softened, and in that softening, you found strength. So breathe. Let the river carry you now. You are no longer at war with your own becoming. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're not chasing anything. Not love. Not approval. Not the next moment. You're just here, in this one, fully, softly, unapologetically. And it's strange, isn't it? How quiet it gets when you stop trying to be who you think the world wants you to be. How light your body feels when you stop carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. How still your mind becomes when you stop begging for clarity and start embracing the unknown. This is what alignment feels like. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic breakthroughs. It arrives when you're brushing your teeth and realize your jaw isn't clenched anymore. When you catch yourself smiling without a reason, when someone doesn't text back and you don't spiral, you just move on with your day. It's not that you stop feeling, it's that you stop forcing. You stop trying to turn resistance into romance. You stop convincing people to stay who never planned on staying. You stop performing at the altar of please love me and start resting in the sanctuary of I love me. And there's grief in that. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. There's grief in walking away from something you once prayed would work. There's grief in realizing that the story you wrote in your head isn't the one life handed you. But that grief is sacred. It clears space. It returns you to yourself. And you realize something unexpected. You don't need to be rescued. Not anymore, because the one who's been waiting to save you is you. You, the one who stayed awake all those nights wondering what you did wrong. You, the one who held your breath during conversations, afraid your truth would push them away. You, the one who loved without limits, even when you were met with silence. That version of you deserves your softness now. That version of you doesn't need to be fixed. She needs to be held. By you. By the calm inside you. By the knowing that you are not behind, not broken, not too much or not enough. You are exactly where you are meant to be. In this pause, in this breath, in this moment of surrender, where nothing is forced and everything begins to flow. So if you're standing at a crossroads right now, unsure whether to hold on or let go, here's your answer. Choose peace. Choose truth. Choose the path where your soul no longer has to scream to be heard. It won't always feel easy, but it will always be worth it. And in the stillness that follows, life will meet you, not when you beg, not when you chase, but when you trust. Because what's meant for you will not require you to twist yourself into versions you were never meant to be. It will feel like home. It will feel like breath. It will feel like flow,